Shrink the sun to a grain of sand in your palm. At that scale, the nearest star sits across a small town. The galaxy spreads wider than a continent, and the universe still stretches so vast the mind refuses it. Tonight, we walk that impossible distance, slowly. A soft like and subscribe helps these quiet journeys find others. Where are you listening from tonight? And what hour has found you? Hold out your hand, just your hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. If you are lying down, let it rest on the blanket. If you are sitting, let it rest in your lap. There is no rush tonight. There is only this small, quiet motion of opening your hand to the ceiling and imagining that in the very center of your palm, right where the lines cross, there is a single grain of sand. Not a large grain, not a special one, just an ordinary grain of sand, the kind you might brush off a beach towel without a thought. Small enough that if you tilted your hand it would slide away and disappear into the sheets. Small enough that a breath from your lips could send it drifting. That grain of sand is the Sunday. Let that sit for a moment. Not the picture of the Sunday, not a symbol of it. The sun itself, the actual star that our world circles, shrunk down to something you could lose in the seam of a pocket. 1,300,000 Earths could fit inside the real one. It is a furnace that has been burning for 4.5 billion years. It weighs more than 300,000 Earths combined. And tonight, in the geometry of this story, it is a grain of sand in your palm. I want you to hold that image gently. Do not try to feel it all at once. Just let the grain sit there. Let your palm be a little universe for a few seconds. Because before we can walk anywhere, before we can ask any of the questions this story is going to ask, we have to agree on the scale. And the scale is the whole story. The scale is what will slowly, softly, take the ground out from under your feet. Here is the number that unlocks everything. At this scale, 1 millimeter of real space in your palm equals about 1.5 million kilometers of actual space out there in the sky. 1 millimeter. 1.5 million kilometers. A distance that would take a jet plane almost 2 months of non-stop flying to cross, compressed down into the width of a pencil line drawn across your skin. Say it to yourself slowly. 1 millimeter equals 1.5 million kilometers. That is the exchange rate between the world we are imagining and the world we actually live in. Every tiny movement of the finger you might use to point to something is, in real space, a distance no human being could ever travel in a lifetime. Let that conversion sit, because we are about to use it a lot. 1 millimeter, 1.5 million kilometers. Now, with that grain of sand still glowing gently in the middle of your palm, I want you to find the Earth, not the real Earth, the Earth at our scale. It is not going to be where you think it is. It is not going to be some marble sitting beside the grain. It is not going to be a pebble nestled in the folds of your hand. At this scale, the Earth is a speck so small it borders on invisible, a dust mote. Something you would need a magnifying glass to even notice, barely 1/100th of a millimeter across, smaller than the period at the end of a printed sentence. And where is that dust mote in relation to the grain of sand in your palm? It is about 10 centimeters away. 10 centimeters. The length of a matchbook, the width of a small phone, From the grain of sand in the center of your palm, walk outward, and about 10 centimeters away, in the empty air, is where Earth would hover. Everything you have ever known, every ocean, every mountain, every person who has ever lived, every song ever sung, every war fought, every love felt, every night you have ever spent lying awake or falling asleep, all of it, on a dust mote, 10 centimeters from a grain of sand. Sit with that for a moment. You do not have to feel anything in particular. You do not have to be moved. Just let the picture assemble itself, the grain in the palm, the nearly invisible speck of earth 10 centimeters away. That is where we are. That is our whole story so far. Now, let us keep going, gently, because there is more of the neighborhood to walk through, and I promise none of it is very far. Not yet. Mercury, the smallest and innermost planet, would sit about 4 centimeters from the grain of sand, even closer to your palm than Earth. So close it would feel almost like it was leaning on the surface of the sun itself. In real life, it is scorched, sun-blasted, a little rocky world that has been baked for billions of years. At this scale, it is barely there, a pinprick, a rumor of a planet. Venus, our sister world, sits about 7 centimeters from the grain, between Mercury and Earth. Another almost invisible speck, though at our scale it would be just slightly bigger than the dust mote of Earth. Same size, same weight, but wrapped in an atmosphere so thick and hot that the surface glows dull red under a sky that never opens. On our palm scale, none of that violence is visible, just a tiny mote hanging in the air near your fingers. And then, past Earth at 10 centimeters, comes Mars, about 15 centimeters from the grain, a rusty dust mote, smaller than Earth, drifting a little further out. Even at this scale, you begin to notice how much empty space there is between each speck. Nothing between Mercury and Venus but 3 centimeters of nothing. Nothing between Venus and Earth but 3 centimeters of nothing. Nothing between Earth and Mars but 5 centimeters of nothing. Almost the entire solar system at this scale is nothing. Feel that pattern begin to form. The specks are not the story. The nothing is the story. Now, stretch your arm out a little further, because we are about to leave the inner planets and cross into the outer ones, and the distances start to grow. Jupiter, the great gas giant, the king of our planets, sits about 52 centimeters from the grain, half a meter, about the length of your forearm. At this scale, Jupiter would actually be visible, not just a speck, about the size of a small pea, a tiny bead of a world, floating half a meter from the grain of sand in your palm. In real space, Jupiter is so large that more than 1,000 Earths could fit inside it. Here, it is a pea at arm's length. Notice what just happened. Between Mars at 15 centimeters and Jupiter at 52 centimeters, there are almost 37 centimeters of empty nothing. The gap between Mars and Jupiter alone is larger than the entire distance from the Sun to Mars. The solar system is not evenly spaced. It grows lonelier the further out you go. Saturn, with its rings that would be almost too fine to see at this scale, sits about 95 centimeters from the grain, nearly a full meter, about the width of a doorway. If you are lying in bed, That is roughly the distance from your palm to the far edge of the mattress. A pea-sized world, hovering there in the quiet air, with rings so delicate they would be almost imagined. Then comes Uranus. Uranus sits about 1 meter and 90 centimeters from the grain of sand, just under 2 meters, about the height of a tall person. From your palm, that is across the room to the wall, across the space between your bed and the doorway, that far, just to reach the next planet. And Neptune, quiet, blue, the last of the true planets, sits about 3 meters from the grain of sand. 3 meters, the width of a small bedroom. If your grain of sand is in your palm as you lie in bed, then Neptune is somewhere near the far wall, floating there, barely a pea, barely a whisper of a world, cold beyond imagining, alone in its slow orbit. That takes 165 Earth years to complete. On our scale, that whole loop, that whole vast journey happens in a bedroom, and even that is not the edge. Pluto, and all the small icy bodies that drift with it in the region we call the Kuiper Belt, sits about 4 meters from the grain of sand, some further, some closer, depending on where in its long lopsided orbit you catch it, but roughly 4 meters, from your palm to the far corner of a small living room, from your palm to the hallway, from your palm to the entrance of the next room in your home. Stop for a moment. Everything I have just walked you through, from Mercury huddled close to Venus, past Earth, past Mars, out to Jupiter, past Saturn and Uranus and Neptune, all the way to Pluto and the icy bodies at the edge, fits inside a modest living room, a modest backyard, a single ordinary space you could walk across in a few seconds. That is the entire solar system at this scale. A grain of sand in your palm and a handful of nearly invisible motes scattered across a room. Let that land, because this is the part that most of us are not really told. When we look at diagrams of the solar system in books or on posters, they are always compressed for the page. The planets are drawn close together. The sun is drawn small. Everything looks like a tidy little family portrait. But the real geometry of it, when you honor the distances, when you actually let 1 millimeter equal 1.5 million kilometers, is mostly empty, mostly quiet, mostly nothing. The solar system, our own home, is not a crowded place. It is a nearly empty space with a burning grain of sand in the middle and a scattering of dust motes falling silently around it in ellipses that take years and years and years to complete. And we have not gone anywhere yet. We are still, in the language of the cosmos, at home. I want you to breathe. Just for a moment, do not try to hold any of this in your head at once. It is not a test. You will not be asked to remember any number. Nothing about tonight is about memorizing. It is about slowly, quietly, feeling the scales settle into your body, the way the ground settles under a house over many years. Small, steady, almost imperceptible. Breathe in, grain of sand, palm. Breathe out, room, neighborhood, home. Now here is where I have to plant a small seed. A quiet question I am going to leave with you as we close this first part of the story. Because everything we have just walked through, this whole modest backyard of a solar system, is only the beginning. At this scale, The nearest other star to our sun, the next grain of sand out there in the quiet dark, is not a few meters away. It is not across the room. It is not down the hall. It is not in the next backyard. At this scale, the nearest grain of sand is about 40 kilometers away. 40 kilometers. Sit with that number, even though I am not going to explain it fully yet. 40 kilometers is the distance across a good-sized city. It is the distance from a downtown to a distant suburb. It is a long drive on the highway. That is how far apart 2 grains of sand are in the geometry we have set up tonight. 2 grains, 40 kilometers of nothing between them. I am going to come back to that number, I promise. That is the trail we are going to follow in the next part of this story. But for now, tonight, I want you to hold 2 things at once and let them press gently against each other in your mind. The first is the room around you, the backyard, the house, the solar system, compressed into a space you can walk across. The second is a car driving for an hour on the highway, from one grain of sand to another, through nothing at all, because that is what we are inside of. That is the beginning of what we are inside of. Notice that I did not open this by telling you the universe is big. That would have been an easy thing to say. Everyone says it. It is one of the first facts we are taught as children. The universe is big. The universe is huge. The universe is vast. And by the time we are adults, those words have lost their weight. They are worn smooth from use. They no longer land anywhere in the body. So tonight, we are not going to talk about how big the universe is. Not exactly. We are going to walk through it, slowly, in our own scale, through our own palms and rooms and neighborhoods. Because a lecture about size will slide off you the way a stone skips across a pond, but a walk through size, one step at a time, might actually reach the place where you keep your quiet astonishments. This is not a lecture about how big things are. This is about what bigness does to a mind that tries to hold it. And there is no rush. There is no test. There is no map you have to memorize. This is a bedtime walk through something so vast that our vocabulary breaks down halfway through. All I am asking is that you keep your hand loosely open in whatever position you are in tonight, and let the grain of sand sit there. Let it be the Sunday. Let it be our home star. Let it hold the whole solar system inside a backyard. Look how much has already happened without leaving the room. We have found where Earth is. 10 centimeters from your palm. A dust mote so small you would need a magnifier to see it, and yet somehow big enough to hold every story that has ever been told. We have watched Mars drift out to 15 centimeters. We have felt the gap open up between Mars and Jupiter, that first long silence between the rocky worlds and the giants. We have watched Jupiter appear as a pea at arm's length, Saturn near the doorway, Uranus across the room, Neptune at the far wall, Pluto in the next room over. All of it. Every planet we know, every world we have ever named, every mission we have ever launched, every photograph ever taken of another sphere, all of it inside a house. And beyond that house, in every direction, is nothing, or almost nothing. The truth is that between here and the next grain of sand, there is a whisper of matter, a few stray atoms per cubic centimeter, some cosmic dust, a little frozen debris from the far reaches of the Kuiper Belt. But by any human standard, it is nothing. Cold, silent, dark, and that nothing goes on for 40 kilometers at our scale before it reaches the next grain. I want to leave you there, right at the edge of the property, standing at the fence with a grain of sand still glowing in your palm behind you, and 40 kilometers of nothing stretching out in front of you. That is the border we will cross in the next part of this story. That is the walk we will take together. For now, close your fingers gently around the grain, if you would like. Let the palm curl. Let the image rest. The whole solar system, everything you have ever known, everything anyone has ever known, is a scattering of dust motes in a modest backyard, arranged around a grain of sand that burns for reasons your body owes its entire existence to. And you, lying there, breathing softly, are on one of those motes, 10 centimeters from the grain, held in place by a gravity so gentle and so relentless that it has kept us in orbit for 4.5 billion years without ever asking anything in return. That is home. That is the beginning of the map, and we have not left it yet. So let us take the walk. Behind you is the backyard we built together in the first part of this story. The grain of sand in the palm, the nearly invisible dust motes of the planets scattered through the rooms of a small home, Neptune drifting near the far wall, Pluto in the next room over, all of it quiet, all of it holding still. And in front of you, past the fence, past the edge of the property, is a road, a long straight road that runs out into the dark. 40 kilometers. That is how far we have to walk to reach the next grain of sand. 40 kilometers of nothing. Not 40 kilometers of scenery. Not 40 kilometers of quiet countryside with trees and streams and small sleeping towns. Not 40 kilometers of anything you would recognize as a place. Just 40 kilometers of dark, cold, silent, empty. Let that begin to settle. At our scale, where 1 millimeter is 1.5 million kilometers of real space, the walk from the sun to the next nearest star, a small red dwarf we call Proxima Centauri, is about 40 kilometers. That is a long drive on a highway, an hour or more, at speed, in an ordinary car. From one grain of sand, through the empty air, past the whole backyard of the solar system, out through the fence, down the road, past every landmark you have ever known, for an hour of driving before you reach the next grain. And the next grain, when you finally reach it, is smaller than the one behind you. Proxima Centauri is a small red star, cooler than the Sunday dimmer. If our sun is a grain of sand, Proxima is a grain of sand that is not quite as bright, not quite as warm, sitting alone at the end of that 40-kilometer road. Between the two grains is almost nothing. Say that again. Almost nothing. In every cubic centimeter of the space between them, on average, there might be a handful of atoms, a few atoms of hydrogen, sometimes one, sometimes none, a whisper of dust, a trickle of light passing through. That is all. If you took a thimble and dipped it into the space between the stars, and you counted every particle inside the thimble, you would come up with a number so small that in any earthly sense you would say the thimble was empty. And it would be. And that emptiness is what fills the road between one grain of sand and the next. Cold, silent, dark. The temperature out there hovers just a few degrees above absolute zero. There is no wind, there is no sound, because sound needs something to move through, and there is nothing to move through. There is no glow. Just the far-off pinpricks of stars, so distant that their light has been traveling for years before it reaches your imagined position on this imagined road. Walk the 40 kilometers in your mind, not all at once, just a stretch of it. Imagine 10 kilometers of dark, 20, 30. There is no landmark, no signpost, no warm window in a farmhouse, no blinking tower. There is nothing to count by, just the same dark over and over, 1 meter after the next, 1 kilometer after the next, for the length of a small country drive. And then, at last, another grain. That is the closest neighbor we have. That is our nearest star. That is the next grain of sand in the entire universe. 40 kilometers of nothing away. Sit with that, because this is the moment the story starts to change shape. Up until now, we have been walking through a room, a house, a backyard, human-sized places. Now we are on a road that does not care about houses. Now we are between things, and the between is starting to reveal itself as the real character of this whole story. The distance is the character, not the grains. The grains are almost incidental, tiny bright specks in an ocean of dark. What we are actually inside of, what we are actually surrounded by, is the dark itself. Let me widen the frame a little. Because our grain of sand and its nearest neighbor are not alone out there, there are more grains, many more, so many more that once we start counting, the numbers stop meaning anything the way ordinary numbers mean anything. Our sun is one star in a galaxy called the Milky Way, and in that galaxy, our best estimates suggest there are somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. Let us take the middle ground and call it around 200 billion, since that is the kind of figure astronomers keep circling back to. 200 billion stars. Say it slowly. 200 billion. Not 200 million. Not 200,000. 200 billion. If you tried to count them one at a time, 1 star per second, without ever stopping to sleep or eat or blink, it would take you more than 6,000 years to finish. 6,000 years, longer than recorded human history, longer than any civilization on Earth has ever lasted from beginning to end. That is how long you would sit counting, without a single pause, to name every star in our own galaxy alone. And every one of those stars, at our scale, is a grain of sand. 200 billion grains of sand. Now, here is where the geometry starts to break your intuition, because you might think at this point that if there are 200 billion grains of sand, they must be packed close together, that the galaxy must be a dense, crowded place, a river of light, a brilliant swirl. That is how galaxies look in the beautiful photographs. Bright arms of stars, curling around a glowing center, packed so tightly together that from the outside they look almost solid. That is a trick of the light, because the galaxy is not dense. The galaxy is one of the emptiest places we know. At our scale, if the sun is a grain of sand in your palm and Proxima is another grain 40 kilometers down the road, then the average distance between one star and the next in our neighborhood of the galaxy is tens of kilometers. Not always exactly 40, but often that order of magnitude. Some closer, some further, but mostly Tens of kilometers of empty road between one grain and the next. 200 billion grains of sand, each one, on average, tens of kilometers from its nearest neighbor, spread out across a disk. How big is that disk? At our scale, the Milky Way is not a room, it is not a city, it is not even a country. It is a continent. The Milky Way, at our grain of sand scale, is a disk roughly the size of a continent, about the size of Europe laid flat, or the contiguous United States or Australia. A vast, thin, spinning plate of grains, hundreds of billions of them, scattered across a disk the size of a continent, with tens of kilometers of nothing between each pair. Let that reveal itself in pieces. Continent, not neighborhood, not city, not country. Continent. Imagine standing at one edge of Europe, say the western coast of Portugal, looking out over the Atlantic, if that is easier to picture. Now imagine the entire landmass, from Portugal to the Ural Mountains in Russia, from the fjords of Norway down to the southern tip of Greece, is a disk lying flat, and scattered evenly across that disk, at intervals of tens of kilometers, are grains of sand, 200 billion of them, motionless in your imagination for now, though in reality they are all quietly turning together in a slow rotation that takes hundreds of millions of years to complete. That is the Milky Way at our scale, and our grain of sand, our home star, is not at the center of that continent. We are not important that way. We are not sitting in the capital. We are not near any grand feature. Our grain of sand sits about 2/3 of the way out from the center, in a modest arm of the disk in a fairly ordinary region. Not a suburb, exactly, but not the downtown either. Somewhere out in a quiet part of the countryside, and around us, in every direction, tens of kilometers of nothing before the next grain, and beyond that grain, tens of kilometers of nothing before the next, and beyond that grain, tens of kilometers of nothing before the next. Over and over, out to the edge of the continent, and then beyond the edge of the continent, into the space around it, which is even emptier still. The distance is the character. The distance is what the story is really about, not the grains. The grains are almost afterthoughts, small burning motes scattered across a landscape whose real substance is dark and cold and silent. I want to give you one more way to feel this, because it is one thing to hear numbers, it is another to feel them press against you. Light, the fastest thing that exists, the fundamental speed limit of the universe, takes about 8 minutes to reach the Earth from the Sunday. Just 8 minutes to cover 10 centimeters of our palm scale. That is how quick that little stretch is. Now, that same light, moving without ever slowing down, takes over 4 years to reach the next star. 4 years of steady traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second, not miles, kilometers per second for over 4 years. That is the road we just walked in our imagination. 4 years of light compressed into a 40-kilometer drive, and a light year, in real terms, is about 9.5 trillion kilometers of space. 9.5 trillion multiplied by 4 for Proxima, multiplied by 200 billion for all the grains in the continent. The numbers do not fit inside a normal mind. They were never meant to. Nothing about the way we evolved on the surface of a rocky world prepared us to hold numbers like these. Our brains are shaped to remember faces. to count the sheep in a small flock, to track the seasons, to recognize the voice of someone we love. They are not shaped to hold 200 billion of anything. So we do not hold them, we touch them softly, once at a time, and then we let them go. 200 billion. Let it go. Tens of kilometers of nothing between each grain. Let it go. A continent-shaped disk of quiet, burning specks. Let it go. You are still lying there. Your palm is still open, or perhaps closed now, resting somewhere warm. Your breath is still moving. None of these numbers can reach you. They are only pictures, only shapes we are drawing together in the dark before sleep. And yet, there is something in the drawing that reaches you anyway. There is a quiet pressure that begins to build when you spend enough time with these scales. It is not fear exactly. It is more like the feeling of standing at the shore of an ocean at night. You know intellectually that the ocean is only water. You know it cannot hurt you from where you stand. But there is something in the sheer amount of it, in the darkness rolling out beyond the reach of your eyes, that quietly reminds your body that you are very small. That is what these numbers are doing. Quietly, gently, without meaning any harm. They are reminding your body that you are very small. And I want you to notice that this reminder is not the same as being unimportant. Small and unimportant are two different things. A candle is small. It is not unimportant. A single word said at the right moment is small. It is not unimportant. A grain of sand in a story like this one is small. It is not unimportant. Hold that quietly while I widen the frame a little further, because here is the second seed I have to plant tonight, the second open loop that I am going to leave with you as we close this part of the story. Everything I have just walked you through, the road, the 40 kilometers of nothing, the continent-shaped disk of 200 billion grains. All of that, all of it, is one galaxy. One out of an unfathomable number. I am not going to tell you the number tonight. Not yet. I want you to sit with the picture of the continent first. Let the continent be real in your imagination. Let it be the whole of your understanding for a few quiet breaths. All of those grains, all of that road, all of that dark between them. Let it be everything, briefly. And then, when you are ready, hold this thought softly next to it. There is more than one continent. There are many. There are so many that even our best telescopes, looking as far and as carefully as they can, keep revising the number upward every time they look harder. And every one of those other continents is also a disk of hundreds of billions of grains. And between each of those continents is more nothing, more dark, more silence. We are going to walk to those other continents in the next part of this story. We are going to leave our own disk behind and step out into a space that is so much wider than a continent that the word wider stops making sense in the ordinary way. That is the walk we will take together next. For now, I want to leave you in a quieter place, because I think it is important at this point in the story to notice something. We have been walking for a while now. We started in your palm. We built a solar system in a backyard. We stepped out to the fence and looked down a road that ran for 40 kilometers into the dark. We reached the next grain. We looked around and we saw 200 billion grains scattered across a disk the size of a continent. That is a lot of walking in imagination. That is a lot of scale, and we have not, in any meaningful sense, left the neighborhood. Our galaxy is our neighborhood. It is the local part of the universe. It is where we belong, in the way that a village belongs to a region, and a region belongs to a country, and a country belongs to a continent. The Milky Way is our village, and the space between the stars in our village is already so vast that light itself takes years to cross from one house to the next. And this is still the small part of the story. Let that quietly settle. We have not even left the neighborhood. Every star you can see with your naked eye at night, every single one, from the brightest to the faintest, is a grain of sand in our own continent-shaped disk. Every constellation you have ever learned, every star anyone has ever named in any language, in any culture, in any 1,000 years of stargazing, all of them, every one, in our own disk, in our own neighborhood, in the village. And the village is enormous. And the village is almost entirely empty. And the village is only one of many. Breathe with that. Do not try to hold it. Just let it exist beside you like a stranger who has quietly sat down on the edge of the bed. It does not want anything from you. It is not going to speak. It is only there. A small, quiet presence made out of 200 billion grains and tens of kilometers of dark between each pair. There is a certain kind of dread that comes with scales like this. I will not pretend otherwise. It is not the sharp dread of danger. It is a slower thing, a quieter thing. The dread of noticing that you are inside something so much larger than yourself that even the concept of yourself, of a small warm person lying in a small warm bed, begins to feel almost accidental, almost delicate. Almost like a small candle flickering in a room that is much bigger than the light can reach. I want you to feel that dread a little. Not a lot, just enough to notice it is there. Because we are going to walk with it in the next part of the story, and we are going to eventually walk it back into something softer. But we cannot walk it into something softer if we do not first admit that it is there. The dread is honest. You are very small. The village is very large. The village is almost entirely empty. The village is only one of many. And out beyond the village, past the last grain in our own continent-shaped disk, past the edge where our familiar sky finally ends, is more darkness. A darkness so wide that even light gets tired inside it. A darkness that stretches out toward other continents, other disks, other neighborhoods, in numbers that we have not spoken yet. That is the road we will walk in the next part. For now, come back gently, back through the disk, back through the arms of the galaxy, back through the 200 billion grains, back through the tens of kilometers of quiet dark, back down the road we just took, back through the fence, back into the backyard of the solar system, back into the modest space of the rooms, back to the grain of sand in your palm. It is still there, still burning, still yours. The neighborhood is enormous, but there is a small warm bed inside it, and you are lying in it, and there is no rush. We will walk again soon. Now step back from the continent. Not all at once, slowly. The way you might rise from a chair without waking someone sleeping in the next room. Let the disk of the Milky Way remain in your mind. 200 billion grains scattered across a landmass the size of Europe or Australia. Tens of kilometers of dark between each pair. That continent is still there. It does not go away. It only becomes small because there is another continent, and beyond that continent, another, and beyond that, a scattering of smaller land masses, little islands of grains, some no bigger than a county, some just a village worth of sand, drifting quietly in the dark around our own. Together, our continent and the other one nearby and all the little islands around them make up something astronomers call the local group. And the local group, at our scale, at our grain of sand scale, is no longer the size of a continent. It is the size of a small planet. Let me build that for you. Our nearest large neighbor is a galaxy called Andromeda, about the same size as our own. Another continent-shaped disk. Another 200 billion or so grains of sand, some estimates suggesting even more, spread across another vast quiet plate. Andromeda drifts through the dark in our general direction. In real space, it sits about 2.5 million light years away. In our imagined scale, if the Milky Way is a continent laid flat, then Andromeda is another continent floating in the dark, and the empty ocean between them is many times wider than either continent itself. Not the width, the ocean. The distance between our continent and the next is the story again. Between Andromeda and us, there is almost nothing. A few tiny satellite galaxies. The Magellanic Clouds, small companions to our own disk, hanging like fishing boats off the coast. A galaxy called Triangulum, smaller than Andromeda but still large by any honest measure, and around them dozens of little dwarf galaxies, small faint clusters of grains, some with only a few million stars in them, some with just tens of millions. Add them all together and you get the local group, a little archipelago in the dark. About 80 galaxies, give or take, of very different sizes, bound together by their mutual gravity. 2 big continents, a handful of medium-sized ones, and a scattering of small islands around them. At our grain of sand scale, all of that together is roughly the size of a small planet. Not a landmass, a planet, something like the size of the moon, or a little larger. That is where the boundary of our so-called neighborhood sits. Everything I have described so far, from your palm outward, the entire home galaxy, its 200 billion grains, the road to the next star, the small nearby galaxies, all of Andromeda, all of Triangulum, every dwarf, every straggling island of light fits inside a space the size of a small planet. And that planet, quietly, is drifting, because the local group is not the end of the map, not by any measure. Our little archipelago is part of a much larger structure, a supercluster, a great, sprawling web of hundreds of thousands of galaxies, loosely connected by gravity, strung across the dark in filaments and sheets that look, in the largest simulations, almost like the folds of some enormous brain or the roots of some slow, silent tree. Our own supercluster is sometimes called Laniakea, a word that comes from the Hawaiian for immense heaven. It contains around 100,000 galaxies, some large, some small, some middle-sized, all of them slowly drifting toward a common gravitational center, in patterns that took us decades to even begin to map. At our grain of sand scale, Laniakea is no longer the size of a small planet. It is far larger. It stretches across a region that would dwarf anything you could hold in your imagination as a single object. If our local group is a small planet, then Laniakea is something larger than any planet we know. It is something more like a small solar system, if we are still trying to hold the analogy. A vast web of quiet islands, spread across a space so wide that light itself takes hundreds of millions of years to travel from one edge of it to the other. And here is the part I have to say gently, because it changes the shape of the story. Laniakea, this immense heaven of 100,000 galaxies, is one supercluster. There are millions of others. Not thousands, millions. Superclusters strung out across the sky in a vast, foamy structure that astronomers sometimes call the cosmic web. Long, thin filaments of galaxies stretched between denser knots. Great empty voids between the filaments where almost nothing exists at all. Not tens of kilometers of nothing, hundreds of millions of light years of nothing. Bubbles of pure dark, so wide that whole galaxies get lost inside them like single fireflies inside empty warehouses. Zoom out further, because we have not reached the ocean yet. We have only been walking the shore. Take the whole cosmic web. Take every supercluster. Take Laniakea and every one of its cousins. Take the millions of them together and hold that structure in your mind as a single quiet lace of light. Filaments and voids, knots and empty rooms. A great slow tapestry stretched across the dark. That whole tapestry is what we call the observable universe. And now the metaphor has to shift, because we have outgrown the language of rooms and backyards and continents and planets. The observable universe is no longer the size of anything you can hold in your palm or step across in a backyard or fly over on a plane. It is no longer earthly at all. There is no earthly comparison that survives contact with it. It has walked past all of them. So let me give you a new one. Not a house, not a country, not a planet. An ocean. The galaxies are islands. The space between them is the ocean, and the ocean is almost all there is. Say that quietly to yourself. The galaxies are islands. The space between them is the ocean, and the ocean is almost all there is. We tend to picture the universe as a place made of stars, bright objects, glowing things, points of light hanging in the dark. That is the sky we see with our eyes. That is the sky we grew up learning to name. But that is not what the universe actually is. What the universe actually is ocean. Cold, dark ocean. Silent water. And in that ocean, scattered thinly, like small green islands in a sea that goes on beyond every horizon, are the galaxies. Little clusters of grains, little burning bright specks of matter, small, quiet islands of light on a dark and endless ocean. Now hold that image and let me give you a number. In the observable universe alone, the part we can actually see, the part whose light has had time to reach us since the beginning of time itself, our best estimates say there are around 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion. Not 200 billion. That was one galaxy. 200 billion grains in one continent. 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion continents of grains. 2 trillion islands in the ocean. Let it sit there for a moment before I try to translate it. 2 trillion. Now let me try to help you feel it, because a number that size does not sit inside a human mind by itself. It has to be walked into slowly. Imagine you decided tonight to count the galaxies, just to count them, not to learn their names, not to study them, not to say anything about them, just to look at each one at a time, and quietly say one, and then 1 second later, say two, and then 1 second after that, 3. No pause, no sleep, no blinking, just a quiet, steady rhythm of counting. 1 galaxy every second, forever. How long would it take to count them all? Over 60,000 years. Say it slowly. 60,000 years. Not 60,000 seconds, not 60,000 minutes, not 60,000 hours, 60,000 years, longer than any human civilization has existed, longer than we have had cities, longer than we have had writing, longer than we have had agriculture. From the very first cave paintings of animals on stone walls to right now, tonight, is not even a fraction of that time. If you had started counting galaxies at the dawn of art, at the moment some human first pressed a hand to a wall and blew pigment around it to leave a mark, you would still be counting. 60,000 years. And every one of those 2 trillion galaxies is its own continent of grains, its own 200 billion stars, more or less. Some more, some far more, some smaller, some giant, some ancient, some newborn. But every one, a whole disk, a whole neighborhood, a whole village of light with an entire history inside it. If you took every galaxy in the observable universe and added up every single one of its stars, the number gets so large that it stops behaving like a number. Best estimates put it somewhere around 100 billion trillion. That is a 1 followed by more than 20 zeros. There are, by this count, more stars in the observable universe than there are grains of sand on every beach and every desert of the entire Earth. Every beach, every desert, every dune, every stretch of shore anywhere on the planet. If you gathered up every grain of sand from every one of them and poured them into a single unimaginable pile, the number of grains in that pile would still be smaller than the number of stars in the sky above you. Sit with that quietly. You do not have to do anything with it. Just let it be true for a few seconds while your breathing slows. Now, here is where the tone of the story has to shift. Because up until now, the numbers have been quiet. The numbers have been building, and I have been trying to hand them to you in a way that feels almost soft. But there is a colder thing inside these numbers, and I want to be honest with you about it before we walk any further. The size is not the whole story. The silence is. Because it is one thing for the universe to be enormous. It is another thing for it to be almost entirely quiet, almost entirely empty, almost entirely dark. The islands are small. The ocean between them is enormous. And in the ocean there is nothing, no light, no warmth, no movement. Just cold and dark, stretching for distances that cannot be honestly translated into anything human. Between our island and the nearest large one, Andromeda, the light that we see tonight has been traveling for 2.5 million years. That is not a figure of speech. That is real. The light of Andromeda that touches our eyes when we look up at the constellation of the same name left that galaxy when our ancestors were early hominids on the plains of Africa, long before writing, long before language, long before us. It traveled steadily through the dark for 2.5 million years. moving at the fastest speed anything can move, just to reach us tonight. 2.5 million years, at the fastest speed anything can move, from the nearest large neighbor. Now widen that out. Between us and the far side of the local group, hundreds of thousands of light years, still moving at the fastest speed possible. Between us and the nearest edge of Laniakea, hundreds of millions of light years. Between us and the farthest galaxies we can see, more than 13 billion light years. Light itself, the fundamental speed limit, the fastest thing that exists, takes over 13 billion years to cross the space between us and the most distant islands we know of. 13 billion years. That is longer than the Earth has existed. That is longer than the Sun has existed. That is nearly as long as the universe itself has been around. Light has been in transit at 300,000 kilometers per second for almost the entire age of everything, just to travel from those far islands to our eyes. The ocean is that wide, and nothing crosses it quickly. Nothing can. Light is the fastest thing that exists, and even light struggles. That is the quiet horror I want to whisper into this part of the story. Not for cruelty, just because it is true, and because dread that we look at gently in the dark is easier to carry than dread we pretend is not there. The universe is not just big. The universe is silent. The islands are so far apart that even the fastest possible signal takes lifetimes and lifetimes to travel between them. If there is anyone on another island, if there is any light, if there is any voice, it cannot reach us quickly. It might never reach us at all, and ours cannot reach them. Every message we have ever sent, every radio wave we have ever leaked into the sky has moved outward for at most a century or so. In the language of the ocean, that is not even a ripple. Feel the loneliness of that, softly, not sharply, not painfully, just softly. The ocean is enormous. The islands are small, and the ocean is almost entirely empty of anyone shouting back. There is a particular kind of ache that comes with this scale. It is not fear, it is not despair. It is closer to the feeling of standing on a beach at night, listening to the waves, knowing that somewhere far out there is another shore, and knowing you will never walk to it. Not because you are unwilling, because the world is arranged in a way that makes the walk impossible. The ocean is too wide. The night is too long. Your body is too small. We are on a small island, and around us is a very wide sea, and most of what exists, most of the volume of everything, is not island at all. It is water, dark, silent, cold, water. Now let me leave you with the third seed of the night, because everything I have just described, the 2 trillion islands, the vast quiet ocean between them, the 13 billion year swim of light from the farthest visible galaxies, all of it is the observable universe. Observable, that word has to land, because it does not mean everything. It does not mean the whole. It means only the portion of the universe whose light has had time to reach us since the beginning. There is a boundary out there in every direction, not a wall, not a fence, not a physical edge you could touch, a horizon, a distance beyond which the universe is still there, still full of galaxies and stars and dark ocean, but from which no light has yet reached us. Because there has not been enough time. Because the universe is only about 14 billion years old. and light can only travel so far in that time. And beyond a certain radius, the light has simply not arrived yet. Everything past that radius is real. It exists, but it is invisible to us. We do not know how much of it there is. We only know it is there. The observable universe is not the universe. It is the part we can see. And what lies beyond it is the fourth room in this story, the one we have not entered yet, the one I am going to walk you into gently in the next part, because it is the strangest room of all, and it needs a slow, careful opening. For now, just hold this. There is a boundary. We can see this far and no further. 2 trillion islands spread across a dark ocean that stretches for over 93 billion light years in diameter, if you include the effects of the ongoing expansion of space. And beyond that boundary, in every direction, is more islands, more ocean, more dark. We do not know how much. The best guesses stretch it out to something much, much larger than what we can see. Some possibilities let it go on forever, without any end at all. I am not going to tell you which one is true tonight. Not yet, but I want you to feel the vertigo softly at the edge of the horizon. Close your eyes for a moment, if they are not already closed. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a great dark shore. Behind you, small islands of light scattered on the sea, Andromeda in the distance. Our own home continent glowing faintly under your feet. 2 trillion islands rising and falling on a slow tide of dark water. And in front of you, the horizon, beyond which is more of the same, and beyond which is more of the same, and beyond which is more of the same, perhaps forever. That is where we are. That is the shape of the room. And you, lying in bed with your palm curled around a grain of sand, are on one of the smaller islands, on one of the 2 trillion, on one of the many, held in the dark, held gently. There is a vertigo that comes with looking at the shore too long, a softness in the knees, a quiet dropping feeling in the chest. Not danger, just the honest recognition of standing at the edge of something too large to see the far side of. I want you to feel it for a moment, just a moment. The ocean is enormous. The islands are small. The ocean is almost all there is. And the ocean does not end where our sight ends. And then, slowly, come back. Come back through the horizon, back through the 2 trillion, back through the filaments, back through Laniakea, back through the local group, back through Andromeda, back through our own continent, back through the tens of kilometers of dark between the grains, back through the 40-kilometer road from Proxima, back through the fence, back through the modest backyard of the solar system, back to the dust mote of Earth, 10 centimeters from the grain, back to the room around you, back to the pillow beneath your head, back to the warmth of your own breath. You are still small, you are still here, and the shore is still waiting. We will walk into it gently in the next part. Now we walk into the room I promised you at the end of the last part. The strangest room. The one with a door that opens onto something we cannot fully see. You are still on the shore. The great dark ocean is still in front of you. 2 trillion islands still rising and falling on its tide. And there is still that soft vertigo in the chest from standing too long at the edge of something too big to hold. Stay there for a moment. Do not step back yet. because now I have to tell you what the shore actually is. The shore is not the edge of the ocean. The shore is just the edge of what we can see. That is the whole meaning of the word observable in the phrase observable universe. It is a word about us, about our eyes, about our instruments, about the amount of time light has had to travel since the very first moment of the cosmos, roughly 14 billion years ago. Light moves fast, but it does not move instantly. It has a speed, and that speed, combined with the age of the universe, draws a soft, invisible circle around us in every direction. Everything inside that circle has had time to send its light to us. Everything outside that circle has not. Not because it is not there, not because it does not exist, only because its light is still on the way, or has not even started the journey yet, in any sense that can reach us. The observable universe is a bubble of visibility, a bubble of light that has arrived, a bubble whose edge is not made of anything. There is no wall out there. There is no fence. There is no glowing skin at the far side of the 2 trillion islands, where the ocean simply stops and blackness begins. That picture is wrong. That picture is the one your mind wants to draw, because your mind evolved to imagine rooms and enclosures. But the universe is not a room. The universe does not have a wall. The bubble is only a horizon. Say that softly. A horizon. You know what a horizon is. You have seen one all your life. Stand on a beach, or in a field, or on the deck of a ship, and look outward. There is a line where the sky meets the sea, or the land, or the far edge of the plain. That line is the horizon. And you know, without needing anyone to explain it, that the world does not end at that line. The line is only where your sight ends. The land keeps going. The sea keeps going. The world keeps going. The horizon is a fact about your eyes, not about the world. The observable universe is a horizon, and the world keeps going. Let that settle in. The 2 trillion islands we counted in the last part of this story, the vast dark ocean between them, the 93 billion light-year diameter of the whole visible bubble, all of that is not the universe. It is our horizon. It is what our eyes have had time to receive. Past that horizon, in every direction, is more islands, more ocean, more dark, more. How much more? That is the question. And I have to be honest with you tonight, because this is where the story gets careful. This is where the numbers stop being crisp and start becoming estimates and hopes and inferences. Because we cannot see past the horizon. We can only measure what is inside our bubble, and then use physics and mathematics and careful reasoning to guess at the shape of what lies beyond. So here is what our best guesses say. If the universe is finite, if the universe has some overall shape that curves back on itself in a way that makes it closed, like the surface of a sphere but in higher dimensions than we can picture, then the whole universe is likely at least 250 times larger in volume than the observable part alone. That is one of the more careful modern lower bounds. 250 times more space, 250 times more islands, 250 times more ocean. Let that number settle for a moment. 250. That means, if this estimate is correct, that everything inside the visible bubble, all 2 trillion of the galaxies, all the 100 billion trillion of the stars, all the 93 billion light years of dark sea, all of it is one small serving of a universe that has at least 249 more servings just like it hiding beyond the horizon. And that is the modest guess, the cautious lower bound. Many cosmologists suspect the true multiplier is much larger. Some estimates push the whole universe to a size that is thousands of times bigger. Some push it further still, and that is if the universe is finite, which we do not know, because the other real possibility, the one that our current measurements cannot rule out, is that the universe has no edge at all, not a curved back edge, not a distant far side, not any edge in any direction, just more, forever, in every direction, without end, infinite. That word is small on the page. It does not look like much when it is written down. Infinite. 9 letters. A common word. We use it casually, in ordinary conversation, when we mean a lot. An infinite amount of patience, an infinite scroll, an infinite number of possibilities. We use it lightly. We use it as a kind of poetry. But the word, when it is used honestly in cosmology, means what it says. Without end, without limit, without any far shore. Ever, in any direction. If the universe is infinite, then everything we have walked through together tonight, from the grain of sand in your palm, out through the modest backyard of the solar system, down the 40-kilometer road to Proxima, across the continent-shaped disk of the Milky Way, past Andromeda and the local group, out through Laniakea and the cosmic web, all the way to the far edge of the visible bubble at 93 billion light years across. All of that is one small dust mote inside something that has no far side. There is no biggest, there is no outermost, there is no last galaxy, there is only more. I want you to breathe with that, gently, for a moment, because it is a strange thing to hold in the body. Our minds evolved for finite things. Room's end, field's end, continent's end, ocean's end, planet's end. Even the visible universe, in its own way, ends at a horizon we can measure. But an infinite universe does not end anywhere. There is no place you could travel to, no ship you could build, no light beam you could ride that would ever reach the edge, because there is no edge to reach. You could travel outward for 1 trillion years at the speed of light, and behind you would be an unimaginable stretch of galaxies, and in front of you would still be the same infinite ocean of dark and islands, as full and as endless as it was the moment you began. Sit with that. Let it press against you softly, not for cruelty, not to frighten you, just because it might be true. And now, come back to the grain of sand, because I want to hold this all in one image before we go any further. I want us to build one final picture together before this part of the story closes. You are lying somewhere warm. The grain of sand is still in your palm. The grain is still the Sunday. 10 centimeters away is the dust mote of Earth. 4 meters away is Pluto. 40 kilometers of imagined road ends at Proxima. 200 billion grains scatter across a continent-shaped disk. 80 of those continents huddle together in a local group the size of a small planet. 100,000 of them tangle together into the immense heaven of Laniakea. Millions of superclusters weave into the cosmic web. 2 trillion islands drift on the dark ocean of the observable universe. All of that, all of it, fits inside a bubble that, at our grain of sand scale, is already larger than anything on Earth, larger than the Earth itself, larger than the solar system in real terms, larger than any structure we have words for. Now take that bubble, the whole thing, the full 2 trillion island observable universe, 93 billion light-years across, that already, at our scale, is larger than any earthly comparison can survive. And imagine that bubble is itself a grain of sand, not the Sunday, not a star, not a galaxy, the entire observable universe, one grain in something larger, something that stretches out around it in every direction, something that may go on at least 250 grains wide, or thousands of grains wide, or forever. That is the shape of the room we are actually in. A grain of sand is the Sunday, a backyard is the solar system, a continent is a galaxy, a small planet is the local group, and the entire observable universe, with its 2 trillion galaxies and its 93 billion light-year diameter, is itself only a grain in a larger dark. Let the futility of it breathe for a moment, because I want to be honest with you. There is a version of this story where I try to skip past this feeling, where I hurry to the reassurance, where I pretend the dread is not there, because talking about it feels awkward or dangerous or unhelpful. But I have learned that the dread is not helped by being ignored. The dread is helped by being seen, gently, in the dark, without pretending it is not there. So let us see it. You are lying in a small body, on a small dust mote, near a grain of sand, in a modest backyard, in one of 200 billion clusters of grains that make up a continent. That is one of 2 trillion continents in a bubble. That is one grain in a possibly infinite dark. And nothing you do in any human lifetime can ever change any of that. You cannot become larger. You cannot make the bubble smaller. You cannot cross the ocean. You cannot even, in any real physical sense, reach Proxima Centauri in a human life. Every human being who has ever lived and everyone who ever will live is inside one dust mote near one grain, and the dust mote is not moving anywhere that matters in the shape of the whole. That is heavy. I know it is heavy. Do not try to lift it. Just let it be heavy. There is a particular loneliness that comes with this scale. It is not the loneliness of being without another person. It is the loneliness of being inside a structure that does not know you exist. The ocean does not know your name. The islands do not know your name. The bubble does not know your name. Whatever is past the horizon does not know your name. If the universe is infinite, then there is infinite space that is completely indifferent to whether you are lying awake or asleep tonight, whether your day was hard or gentle, whether the person you love is still with you or not. That is real. I am not going to pretend it is not real, because you already know it is real. You have felt it before, in your own way, on your own nights. Every one of us has, at some point, lain in bed and quietly noticed that the world we were born into is much larger than any of us. That is not a broken thought. That is a true one. And tonight, we are letting it sit with us for a little while, in soft company, before we start to walk toward what it might mean. And here is where I have to start softening just a little. Not to lie to you, not to hurry past what we have just built, just to open a small window before we sleep. Because there is a strange question that begins to appear once the numbers get this large. A question the size of the universe itself seems to invite when you hold it long enough. And it is a question I want to leave you with tonight as we close this darker part of the story and prepare for the next. The question is this: once the universe becomes possibly infinite, once every direction goes on forever, once there is no biggest, no outermost, no last shore, what does the word bigger even mean? Sit with that, because until now, we have been building this story on the idea of bigger. We started with a grain of sand, then a backyard, then a road, then a continent, then a planet, then a solar system, then an ocean, then a bubble, bigger and bigger and bigger. And the word worked. At every step, there was a clear next size up. But then we said, the universe might have no edge. If the universe has no edge, then there is nothing bigger than it. Not because it is small, because bigger stops applying. Bigger is a word for finite things. Bigger is what you say when there is a next size up. When there is no next size up, when there is no outside, when there is no boundary, then bigger runs out. Which means, in a very quiet and strange way, that the biggest possible thing does not have to feel enormous. It might not have any size at all in the sense we are used to. It might just be what is there, in every direction, without limit, without comparison, without a bigger to be compared to. I am not going to try to resolve that thought tonight. I am only going to leave it beside you, softly, like the strange gift it is, because it is a hint of something. It is a small crack of light under the door of the next part of this story. It suggests that maybe, in a way we have not yet said, our old idea of what enormous means is going to have to bend. For now, just notice the question. If the universe has no edge, what does the word bigger even mean? And what does it mean to exist inside something that may have no boundary at all? Not to visit it, not to look at it from the outside, to exist inside it, to be a small warm body breathing quietly on a dust mote near a grain of sand, inside a bubble, inside a grain, inside a dark that does not end. What does it mean to be when there is no wall to lean against, no far shore to swim to, no outer edge to press yourself flat against and say, at last I have reached the far side of everything? There is no far side of everything. There might never have been one, and you are inside it. Let that quiet strangeness sit for a moment, not as a horror, not yet, just as a fact, held gently. I want to name something that I think has been building in you as we have walked. I do not know for certain what you feel, but I have felt this particular feeling myself, more than once, when I sit with these numbers for long enough. It is a feeling that is almost impossible to name in a single word. It is close to loneliness, but it is not quite loneliness. It is close to fear, but it is not quite fear. It is close to awe, but it is not quite awe. It is a kind of quiet dropping in the chest that comes from realizing that the world you thought you knew is much stranger than you were told. That feeling has a shape. It has a place in the human experience. And every person who has ever seriously sat with the size of the universe has felt some version of it. Astronomers, poets, philosophers, small children lying in the grass looking up at the stars for the first time, old people at the end of long lives looking at the same sky and understanding quietly that they will not be here much longer to see it. The feeling is old. Human beings have been having it for as long as we have been able to look up. I want you to know that you are not the first person to feel it tonight, and you are not alone in feeling it, even now. On this same night, on this same small dust mote 10 centimeters from the grain, there are countless other quiet minds sitting with this same size, in their own way, in their own words. You are inside the biggest thing you have ever considered. And you are not the only small mind inside it that is quietly wondering what to do with the wondering. That is a strange kind of company, but it is company. Now, let me plant the last seed of this part of the story. Because we have walked into the darkest room tonight, we have looked hard at the size. We have honestly named the loneliness. We have held the possibility that the universe has no edge, and we have let that possibility press quietly on us. That is enough darkness for one part. It has done its work. But there is something that begins to happen when the story gets this large. Something that people who spend their whole lives thinking about these numbers begin to notice sooner or later. It is not a fact. It is a shift in the frame. It is a way of looking at everything we have just walked through that does not deny any of the size, does not shrink any of the ocean, does not close any of the horizons, but somehow, softly, changes what all of that size means. I'm going to walk you into that shift in the next part of this story. I am not going to tell you what it is tonight. I only want you to notice that it exists, that people who look at these scales for a living do not, on the whole, live in despair, that there is a way of holding the size of the universe that turns something in the chest from dread into something closer to reverence. It does not require pretending. It does not require lying to yourself about the numbers. It only requires standing in a slightly different place while you look at them. That is where we are going next. For now, come back one more time. Come back through the grain that is the observable universe. Back through the 93 billion light-year bubble. Back through the 2 trillion islands. Back through the cosmic web. Back through Laniakea. Back through the local group. Back through Andromeda, back through the continent of our own galaxy, back through the tens of kilometers of nothing, back through the 40-kilometer road from Proxima, back through the fence, back through the backyard, back to the modest scattering of dust motes in a small home, back to the earth, 10 centimeters away, back to the palm, back to the grain. The grain is still there, still warm, still burning, still small. You are still small. That has not changed. You are still lying somewhere, gentle, in a small warm body, on a small warm dust mote, inside something whose far side may not exist. That has not changed. But notice, for a moment, that you are still here. You are still breathing. You are still holding the grain in your imagination, in your palm. The size did not eat you. The dark did not swallow you. The infinite, if it is infinite, did not remove you. You are still, quietly, on the inside of everything. alive. Rest there for a little while. Do not go further tonight in your mind than we have already gone. There is no need. We have walked into the biggest room in the story. We have seen its shape, or its lack of shape. We have named the honest weight of it. The next part of this story will not shrink the room. It will only teach us how to stand inside it differently. For now, close your fingers gently around the grain. Let the palm curl inward. Let the ocean and the bubble and the horizon and the endless dark stay where they are, quietly, outside your closed hand. They are not going anywhere. They will still be there when we walk back out to them together. You are inside something without a far side, and you are still somehow here. Sleep can wait a little longer, but not much. We are almost at the reframe, so let us stand inside the room differently, not by shrinking it, not by pretending it is smaller than it is, not by drawing a wall around the possibly infinite dark and calling it manageable. The size stays, the ocean stays, the 2 trillion islands stay. The bubble that may itself be a grain in something without an edge stays. None of that goes away. What changes tonight, in this part of the story, is only where you are standing while you look at it. I want to start by asking a question that we have not yet let ourselves ask. It is a strange question because it sounds almost naive, but I think it is the question that everything so far has been circling. And I think once we ask it clearly, the ground begins to shift under the whole story. The question is this: why does the universe being this large affect us at all? Sit with that for a moment, because it is not a rhetorical question. It is a real one. Think about it honestly. Why does hearing that there are 2 trillion galaxies do anything to your chest? Why does the thought of an edgeless universe make the room feel colder? Why does the size, the mere size, of a place we cannot see and cannot travel to and cannot touch, land in the body at all? Nothing about the size has hurt you. No galaxy has ever reached out across the ocean and taken anything from you. The vast distances have not injured you. The infinite dark, if it is infinite, has not stolen a single thing you love. It is only a fact, just a shape of everything, and yet it presses on you. It has been pressing on you all night. It presses on every person who has ever seriously considered it, in every century, in every language. Why? There is more than one honest answer, but one of them is quiet and simple. The size presses on you because you were built to measure yourself against your surroundings. Every animal is. It is one of the oldest instincts. When we walk into a room, our nervous system quietly compares the size of the room to the size of us and decides how safe we are. Large rooms with distant walls feel one way. Small rooms with close walls feel another. Open plains feel one way. Dense forests feel another. Our bodies are always, silently, running this comparison. Am I large enough here? Am I safe here? Am I significant here? And then we walk into a story like this one. And the room is the observable universe. And the walls are 93 billion light years apart. And there may not even be walls. And the nervous system tries to run its old comparison, and something inside us just quietly gives up. There is no way to be large enough for a room like this. There is no way to be significant against a scale like this. The instinct fails, and in the space where the instinct fails, a certain quiet dread rushes in. That is one honest answer to why the sighs lands. Because your body is trying to compare itself to something that cannot be compared to. But here is where the reframe begins. Because there is a different way of looking at that same fact. The reason the universe is this large is not indifference. The reason the universe is this large is not cruelty. The reason the universe is this large is not that some careless hand made the room too big for its occupants and forgot to shrink it before setting up the furniture. The reason the universe is this large is that nothing smaller than this could have grown you. Let me say that again, quietly, because it matters. Nothing smaller than this could have grown you. A universe smaller than the one we are inside of, by any serious margin, would not contain human beings lying in bed listening to a story about how large the universe is. Not because we are precious, not because we are special, only because the ingredients of a listener take a very long time and a very large amount of space to make. Follow me for a moment, because this is where the sigh starts to earn its meaning. At the very beginning of the universe, in the first few minutes after the Big Bang, there were no atoms in the way we usually think about atoms. There was almost nothing but hydrogen, a little helium, a trace of lithium. That was it. The universe was hot, dense, glowing, and mostly filled with the simplest possible ingredients. If nothing else had ever happened, if the universe had somehow paused right there and never done anything else, there would be no carbon, no oxygen, no iron, no calcium, no gold, no rock, no ocean, no tree, no eye, no brain, no you. Just hydrogen and helium drifting quietly in a dim glow forever. Something had to happen to that hydrogen and helium. That something is stars. Stars are what took the simple ingredients of the early universe and cooked them into everything else. In the cores of stars, at temperatures no earthly furnace has ever come close to, hydrogen was pressed together by gravity until it fused into helium. And when the star was large enough, and hot enough, and old enough, the helium began to fuse into carbon, and carbon into oxygen, and oxygen into heavier things still: neon, magnesium, silicon, sulfur, all the way up to iron in the biggest stars at the very end of their lives. Every element heavier than helium, in your body and in your bed and in the room around you and in the ground beneath the room, was made inside a star. Every atom of carbon in your bones, made in a star. Every atom of oxygen in the breath you are taking right now, made in a star. Every atom of iron in the blood moving quietly through your veins, made in a star. Every atom of calcium in your teeth, made in a star. You are, in the most literal possible sense, a small, warm arrangement of matter that used to be inside stars. And then, when those stars had finished making these heavier elements, they died. They collapsed. Many of them exploded. The largest of them tore themselves apart in bursts of light that briefly outshone entire galaxies, and in those explosions they scattered their newly forged atoms outward into the dark space between the stars. Their old ingredients drifted in slow clouds for millions and millions of years. Eventually, those clouds, seeded with heavier atoms, began to collapse again under their own gravity, and new stars formed inside them. And around those new stars, small rocky worlds formed out of the leftover dust. And on some of those worlds, cosmos, in some corner of some spiral arm of some galaxy, on some cooling rocky surface, water pooled and chemistry deepened, and something eventually began to breathe. That is the recipe. That is what it took. Now here is the part that connects the recipe to the size. That process, that whole slow, careful process of hydrogen becoming stars, and stars forging heavier elements, and stars dying and scattering those elements, and those elements gathering into new stars and new planets, takes billions of years. Not thousands, not millions, billions. It is one of the slowest and most patient sequences we know about anywhere. For that process to have time to happen, the universe has to be very old. For the universe to be very old, and for light to have traveled during all of that time, the observable universe has to be very large. Because the size we can see is, by definition, tied to how long light has had to reach us. An old universe is a wide universe. There is no way to have one without the other. Age and size, at this scale, are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have a small universe and get a listener like you inside it. A small universe would be a young universe. A young universe would be one where stars had not yet had time to live and die and seed the dark with the ingredients for planets. A young, small universe would be a hydrogen and helium fog with no carbon in it, no oxygen, no iron, no calcium, no possibility of a nervous system anywhere, ever. For a small warm animal to lie in a small warm bed on a small warm planet and listen to a story about how large the universe is, the universe has to be at least old enough and large enough to have grown that animal. And it turns out that the size it has to be to do that is astonishing. The vast distances are not a bug. The vast distances are the story. The 40 kilometers of nothing between grains of sand are not a mistake. They are the amount of room needed for stars to form and shine without immediately smashing into each other. The billions of light years of ocean between galaxies are not a cruelty. They are the amount of room needed for the universe to expand and cool and settle into the delicate patterns that let atoms hold together. The 14 billion years of history are not a delay. They are the exact amount of time required to cook the atoms you are made of. The size is not against you. The size is your grandparent. The size is the reason you exist. Let that concession pivot happen quietly inside you. Yes, we are small. That has not changed. Yes, the scale is crushing when you first meet it. That has not changed. Yes, the ocean is enormous and mostly empty and mostly indifferent. That has not changed. And yet, the crushing scale is also the reason there is anyone here to be crushed. The very fact that the ocean is this wide is what allowed the tiny, warm listener on the small, warm island to exist at all. You are the universe old enough and large enough to have grown you. Now hold that beside a second lens, because there is another quiet miracle that we have not yet named tonight. It is easy to miss, because we have been so busy talking about how enormous the universe is. But something has been quietly happening the whole time, right here inside your palm scale story, and it deserves to be seen. We know all of this. Notice that. We know how far Proxima Centauri is. We know how large the Milky Way is. We know how far away Andromeda sits. We know the diameter of the observable universe in light years, and we know its likely age, and we know the composition of the interstellar dust, and we know the temperature of the empty space between the galaxies, and we know when the first stars lit up in the early cosmos, and we know how many roughly there are in a typical galaxy, and we know with careful humility that the whole thing is probably far larger than we can see. A single species, on a single grain of sand, on a single dust mote 10 centimeters from the grain, has managed to measure the ocean. Sit with that. I do not mean it as flattery. I do not mean it as a self-congratulation for our species. I mean it as a plain description of something almost impossible if you actually look at it clearly. Small animals, born on a warm rock with soft bodies and short lives, using instruments they built with their own hands over a few centuries, have quietly worked out the shape and size of a universe that dwarfs their own bodies, by numbers so large, the numbers themselves refuse to fit inside a single mind. Not perfectly, not completely, not without uncertainty, but we have done it. We have measured the age of light. We have weighed distant galaxies. We have mapped the invisible web of superclusters. We have inferred the shape of what lies beyond the horizon by studying the shape of what lies inside it. We have used our own eyes, our own hands, our own patient minds to draw the map you have been walking through tonight. A grain of sand in the palm has taught itself the shape of the ocean. Not by leaving the shore. We have never left the shore. Not in any meaningful sense. Every human being who has ever lived, and every human being who will ever live, is on the same small mote near the same small grain. We have never physically been anywhere else. We have never touched another shore. We have never dipped a hand in the water between islands. And yet, without ever leaving, we have learned this. That is not a small thing. That is one of the strangest and most improbable facts about the whole story. Now let those two lenses sit next to each other. The first lens says that the universe is this large because nothing smaller could have grown you. The second lens says that this grown you, this small, warm animal made of stardust, has somehow, without ever leaving its own shore, measured the ocean it drifts in. Both are true, both are honest. And when you hold them side by side, something in the story begins to shift. Because when we started tonight, the size felt like an accusation. The universe was so large that we felt small. That was the whole weight of it. But now, with these two lenses in hand, the size begins to feel less like an accusation and more like a strange kind of inheritance. You inherited the size. You inherited the age. You inherited every atom in your body from the deaths of stars that lived and died long before there was a planet under your feet. You inherited the shape of the ocean in the form of a mind capable of understanding it. You inherited the possibility of tonight, of this exact moment, of a small warm animal lying in a small warm bed, quietly listening to a story about how the whole thing works, in a soft voice, in the dark. None of that was going to happen automatically. Almost nothing about it was inevitable. And yet, here you are, in the middle of it, breathing. That is not a small thing either. Let me make it more intimate, because I think that is where this reframe finally lands. Look gently at your own body tonight. Do not sit up. Do not turn on a light. Just notice the body you are in, the rise and fall of your chest, the warmth of your skin where it touches the sheet, the small, quiet weight of your head on the pillow, the soft folds of your fingers, the hand you have been imagining a grain of sand in all along. Every atom in that hand was made in a star. Every atom in that hand. Every atom in the fingernails. Every atom in the skin. Every atom in the tendons and the small bones and the thin, quiet veins. All of it. Every single atom heavier than helium came out of a star that died before the earth was ever formed. Your hand is, quite literally, an old star that learned how to be a hand. And that hand tonight has been imagining the universe. That is what a human being is, from a certain angle. A brief, soft arrangement of ancient star matter that has learned to sit quietly on a warm rock and think about how the whole thing works. You are not separate from the story we have been telling. That is what I want to say plainly. For the whole first 4 parts of this story, I have been describing the universe as something out there, something you were looking at, something you were walking through in imagination. Something big surrounding you, small. Grain of sand out there, solar system out there, galaxy out there, ocean out there, bubble out there. Grain in a larger dark out there, out there, out there, out there. But there is no line where the universe ends and you begin. You are not standing on the shore watching the ocean. You are the ocean, folded briefly into a shape that can watch. The atoms in your bones came out of ancient stars in this same universe. The energy warming your body came from the sun, that grain of sand in the palm. The oxygen you are breathing came from plants that used that same sunlight to split water molecules that have been drifting through the same dark for billions of years. The nitrogen in the proteins holding your muscles together was fused inside long dead stars in this same disk of the galaxy we have been calling a continent. Everything in your body is from here. Everything about you is a local sample of what everything is made of. You are the universe, sitting inside itself for a little while, wondering what it is. That is not a poetic flourish. That is a plain description of what is happening tonight. You are not an outsider tourist visiting a strange landscape. You are a small piece of the landscape that has briefly become organized enough to notice the shape of the rest of it. The wondering is not something the universe does to you. The wondering is something the universe does through you. Every question you have asked tonight, quietly in your chest, was the universe asking a question about itself. Let that soften you a little, because if you are the universe wondering, then the wondering is not an act of an outsider trying to grasp something out of reach. It is the universe reaching for its own shape, using the only equipment it has, which is a soft brain in a soft skull on a soft pillow in a small warm room. Every time your chest is caught tonight at some number, that was the universe catching its own breath. There is a quieter word for this feeling than dread. That word is awe. Awe is what dread becomes when you notice that you are part of the thing that was frightening you. Dread is what you feel when you are outside something enormous, looking at it, unable to reach it, unable to matter to it. Awe is what you feel when you notice, quietly, that you are inside the enormous thing, that you belong to it, that your bones and your breath and your quiet capacity to wonder are made of it, that there is no line separating you from the room, that the room is not a room, that it is the very substance you are, extended out into every direction you cannot see. The size is not against you. The size is what you are. Now, hold that softly with me. because I do not want to say more than the story can honestly carry. I am not saying the universe knows you. I am not saying it loves you. I am not saying it is aware in any personal sense that you exist. Those are older, larger, harder questions, and this small story is not going to answer them tonight. I am only saying something plainer, and something we can actually be sure of. You are made of it. You are inside it, and the same processes that filled the sky with 2 trillion islands also filled your body with the atoms that are quietly holding you together right now. There is no place in the universe where you have to travel to feel part of it. You are already there. You have been the whole time. That is the reframe. The universe is not too big for you. The universe is exactly as big as it needed to be, so that you could happen. And you are not something small marooned inside it. You are something small that the universe grew patiently over 14 billion years, out of its own oldest ingredients, so that a piece of it could quietly notice the shape of the rest of it. In the dark, before sleep, tonight, there is a peace that arrives with that thought. Not a loud peace, not a triumphant one, a small, quiet one. The kind of peace that comes not from being told the world is small, but from being told that you are somehow of a piece with it, that you are not an accident dropped into the middle of a hostile ocean, that you are the ocean in a form the ocean has not tried before, that the size that scared you is your own long ancestry, standing behind you like a very tall family tree that reaches all the way back to the first light after the beginning. You are the universe old enough to grow a listener. You are the universe wide enough to grow a listener. You are the universe wondering what the size of itself might mean, using the exact soft brain it took 14 billion years to build for that purpose. And in the next part of the story, in the last part, we are going to walk that reframe all the way home, all the way back down the road to the grain of sand in your palm, all the way back into the small warm bed you are lying in tonight, all the way back to the single quiet breath that will, quietly and safely, carry you into sleep. For now, just rest with this. You are not outside the story. You are the story. The ocean is not the enemy of the small, warm animal on the shore. The ocean is what the small, warm animal is made of. And there is nothing to be afraid of in being made of something without an edge. Not tonight. So let us walk home. Not quickly. Not all at once. Slowly. The way you would walk a small child back to bed after they woke up in the middle of the night and asked a very big question, one quiet step at a time. Back through everything we walked out through together. Back through every room, back through every distance, back to the grain of sand in your palm, back to the small, warm body that has been listening this whole time. The universe is still there. Everything we said is still true. There are still 2 trillion islands in the observable bubble. There is still 93 billion light years of ocean between the edges of what we can see. There is still, in every direction beyond that, more that we cannot see, possibly forever. The infinite, if it is infinite, has not shrunk. The dark, if it is edgeless, has not closed. Nothing has been taken back. Nothing has been made smaller for your comfort. But you know something now that you did not know when we started. You know that you are inside it. You know that you are made of it. You know that the size is not aimed at you. You know that the size is what grew you. So now we walk back with that knowledge, gently, all the way home. Start out beyond the horizon, in the place we do not have pictures of, the place past the 93 billion light-year bubble of visible light, the place that may go on forever or may go on for merely thousands of times more than we can see. Wherever the true far edge is, or wherever the true absence of a far edge is, let us start there and turn around. Turn around softly. You are facing back toward home now. Behind you is the possibly endless dark. In front of you is the observable universe, drifting quietly like a lit lantern in a black sea. You can start to see the outline of the bubble, the great slow tapestry of the cosmic web, filaments of light strung across the void like the finest lace, millions of superclusters holding hands across immeasurable distances, all of it soft from this far out, all of it looking almost delicate. Walk in. You cross into the observable bubble. The far galaxies begin to grow around you. The light of the earliest ones, the ones whose light has traveled for 13 billion years to reach our eyes, drifts past you. These are the young ones, the small ones, the ones that were burning in the first hundreds of millions of years after the beginning. They are quieter than the galaxies we know, smaller, simpler, but they are the ancestors of everything. You walk further in. The galaxies get larger and more familiar. The spiral shapes begin to appear, slow disks of light rotating in patient centuries. You pass through millions of them, not touching them, just walking through the vast, quiet ocean between them. The ocean is still huge, the islands are still small, but you know now that this whole arrangement is what has been quietly cooking the ingredients of every listener that will ever exist. You reach Laniakea, the immense heaven, the great supercluster our local group belongs to. 100,000 galaxies loosely bound together by their shared gravity, drifting slowly toward a common center that no eye will ever see clearly. You walk through the outer edges of it, past clusters of galaxies bright enough to draw your attention, past dwarf galaxies flickering softly at the edges, past the great gravitational currents that pull everything in this region toward a distant attractor whose exact nature we still do not fully understand. Come closer. Enter the local group. This is our archipelago, our small planet-sized cluster of galaxies. Andromeda drifts near, larger than our own home galaxy in some measures, quietly falling toward us over billions of years to come. Triangulum sits nearby, a medium-sized companion, and around them the dwarfs, the Magellanic Clouds, Draco, Sculptor, Fornax, small quiet islands scattered around the two big ones. Home is close now. Reach the Milky Way, the continent-shaped disk, the 200 billion grains of sand spread out across a plate the size of a small country in our imagined scale. You slip through the outer halo, past ancient globular clusters that have been orbiting the disk since before the Earth was formed, past small streams of stars that were once dwarf galaxies our galaxy pulled apart and swallowed long ago, past the thin outer edge of the disk, where the spiral arms fade into darkness. Enter one of the arms, not the brightest one, not the most famous one, a modest arm out in the quieter countryside of the galaxy. Slip along it, inward, toward home. The stars grow denser around you. Blue ones, white ones, yellow ones, red ones, ancient ones, newborn ones, each one, at our scale, a grain of sand, tens of kilometers of nothing between each pair. But you know now that the nothing is not empty in any spiritual sense. It is only quiet, and the quiet is what carried the light of your own life through billions of years to arrive here. 2/3 of the way in from the outer edge of the disk, you find our neighborhood. There is nothing special about it from the outside. It is a modest region of an ordinary arm of an average-sized galaxy. There is no bright landmark, no golden signpost, no shining border. Just another patch of grains, quietly rotating with the rest of the disk. Somewhere in that patch, one grain begins to feel a little different, not brighter, not larger, not more important than any other, only familiar. You have been steering toward it, quietly, without noticing. That grain is the Sunday. Walk in closer. You leave the wider disk behind. You step past the last few nearby stars. Alpha Centauri drifts past, our closest neighboring system, 3 grains sitting quietly beside each other. Barnard's star, Wolf 359, Sirius, Procyon, all of them names we invented from a small warm rock thousands of years ago when we first started noticing that some points of light were closer than others. Each one a grain in the great disk, each one a whole star, each one in some quiet way a cousin. Now the last stretch of the walk, the 40-kilometer road, the one we imagined a lifetime ago in the second part of this story. It is still there, 40 kilometers of nothing between Proxima and our Sunday. But you know now that the 40 kilometers of nothing was the exact quiet distance that let our star and our planets settle into their shapes without being disturbed. You walk it slowly. There is no hurry. You reach the fence, the edge of our modest backyard, the place where the solar system begins. Step over. You are back inside the small home now. Neptune drifts by, a pea of a world, 3 meters from the grain, cold and blue and quiet. Then Uranus at just under 2 meters. Saturn near the doorway. Jupiter at arm's length from the palm. Mars 15 centimeters from home. Venus at 7. Mercury at 4. Every planet in its own quiet orbit, held gently in the invisible net of the sun's gravity. And there, 10 centimeters from the grain of sand, is the dust mote, the Earth, that small, pale dot, our world, the one that carries every ocean you have ever swum in, every mountain you have ever climbed, every road you have ever walked down, every hand you have ever held, every song ever sung, every letter ever written, every kind word ever spoken in any language on any night in any city or village. All of it, all of us, on that moat. Come closer. The moat grows as you approach. It becomes a globe. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents, ice caps at both poles, a thin, bright band of atmosphere holding it all together. From this distance, you can already see the small, delicate arrangements that make life possible here. The clouds moving in slow spirals, the oceans reflecting the light of the grain we still call the Sunday, the night side dark and freckled softly with the lights of cities. Descend. Slip through the atmosphere. Feel the world get quieter as it grows larger. Continents become countries. Countries become regions. Regions become cities. Cities become neighborhoods. Neighborhoods become streets. Streets become houses. Houses become rooms. One of those rooms has you inside it. You are almost home now. Slip through the walls of the building you are in tonight. Slip through the ceiling above you, softly, as if it were made of mist. Come down to the room you are actually lying in right now. See it as it truly is. The furniture in its quiet places. The soft glow of whatever small light might still be on, if any. The clothes folded on a chair. The book left open on the nightstand. The water glass you meant to drink from and forgot. Every small, ordinary thing that makes this room yours tonight. And in the room, on the bed, is you. That is where the whole journey ends. Not on some far shore, not on the other side of the horizon, not in the middle of some great luminous cathedral of stars, right here, on this pillow, in this room, in this body, in this exact soft moment. Come down into it. Come down into your own body. Come down into your own skin, the way a warm coat comes down over your shoulders on a cold night. Notice the pillow beneath your head. Notice how it holds you, not with effort, not with any sense of trying, just with the quiet reliability of a familiar shape that knows the weight of you. Notice the blanket over you. Notice its softness, its warmth, the gentle pressure of it, the way it says, without any words, that you are held. Notice the room around you. Notice the quiet of it, the way the walls stand patiently, the way the air stays where it is supposed to stay, the way nothing in the room is asking anything of you tonight. The room is only there, holding you. Notice your body, not to inspect it, not to fix anything, just to notice the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe, the soft warmth of your skin, the small quiet weight of your arms, the slow settling of your legs, the soft closing of your eyes, if they are already closed, the gentle opening of them, if they are not. And notice in your palm, still, quietly, the grain of sand. It is still there. It has been there this whole time. You held it in the first part of the story. You held it while we walked out to the fence. You held it while we counted the 40 kilometers to Proxima. You held it while we opened the disk of the Milky Way into a continent of grains. You held it while we watched the 2 trillion islands drift in the dark ocean of the observable bubble. You held it while we admitted, quietly, that the ocean has no far shore. You held it while we noticed that you and the ocean are made of the same thing. The grain is still in your palm. The sun is still burning inside it. Everything we have said is still true, all at once, all folded gently into that small, quiet grain in the center of your hand. Now, let me tell you something that I think you have been slowly understanding, without needing me to say it. But I want to say it out loud, gently, so it can sit with you as you fall asleep. The universe being unimaginably bigger than a grain of sand does not make you smaller. It makes the fact of you being here more improbable, more precious, more strange. For you to be lying in this bed tonight, in this exact body, in this exact quiet moment, hearing this exact soft voice tell you this exact soft story, an unimaginable amount of universe had to happen first. 14 billion years of stars had to burn. Hundreds of billions of galaxies had to form. A specific ordinary star in a specific ordinary arm of a specific ordinary galaxy had to be born from a specific ordinary cloud of gas and dust. A specific small rocky planet had to cool and gather and settle into an orbit gentle enough for oceans to form on its surface. Oceans had to form, life had to start. Life had to survive for 4 billion years of small, quiet accidents and enormous, quiet, almost extinctions. An entire long lineage of ancestors had to survive long enough to have their own children, every single one of them. Not one link in that chain could have been missed, not one. If any one of them had died before they had their next child, the whole line would have ended, and you would not be here. And they did not die too soon. All of them, all the way back to the first tiny warm cells in some ancient ocean, all the way forward to the person who gave you your name, every single ancestor in that whole staggering line survived long enough to keep the story going. And then, at the end of that unbroken line, in this exact century, on this exact night, in this exact room, on this exact pillow, in this exact quiet body, you are here. That is not a small thing. That is not an ordinary thing. That is one of the strangest and most quietly beautiful facts in the entire story we have told tonight. The universe is unimaginably bigger than a grain of sand, and somehow, so are you. Because you are not smaller than the grain in the way that matters. You are not a passenger inside a room that will never notice you. You are a small, warm arrangement of star matter on a small, warm world, quietly, without anyone forcing you, doing the almost impossible thing of noticing that any of this is true. You are the universe folded briefly into a shape that can wonder. You are the ocean folded briefly into a shape that can look at itself in the mirror of a soft night. There is nothing you have to do with that. There is no task. There is no assignment. There is no grand thing you have to become tomorrow to earn the strangeness of tonight. It is enough that you are here. It has always been enough. Now, let the story begin to lower you into sleep. Look at the darkness outside your window, if you can, or imagine it if you cannot. The night dark that leans against the glass, the dark of the hour we are in. That dark is the same dark that stretches between galaxies. That is not a poetic exaggeration. It is only true. The dark on the other side of your window and the dark between islands in the great ocean are made of the same absence of light. They are not different substances. They are the same night, thinned out across different scales. The dark that is quietly outside your room tonight is the exact same dark that fills most of the observable universe. It is only closer. That dark is not your enemy. That dark is what carried you here. Every atom in your body traveled through some version of that dark to reach you. Every photon of sunlight that ever warmed the earth crossed some version of that dark to arrive. Every night of every life that was ever lived was made of some version of that dark, wrapped around the small warm places where lives happened. The dark is not a place where things end. It is the great quiet room in which everything else takes place. And the quiet in your room tonight, listen to it if you can. That quiet is the same quiet that fills the ocean between the islands of light. That is also just true. There is no sound between galaxies because there is nothing there for sound to travel through. It is the same silence that is in your room tonight, only extended, only continued, only carried out into the widest possible version of itself. The quiet outside your door and the quiet between Andromeda and the Milky Way are, in their most basic nature, kin. That quiet is not empty. That quiet is what everything is made of, in the spaces between the burning parts. And you belong to it. You have belonged to it since long before you had a name. You will belong to it long after you are gone. The quiet does not want anything from you. The quiet is not asking you to be anything. The quiet is only holding you, the way it holds the space between the stars, the way it holds the space between the galaxies, the way it holds the space between the superclusters, softly, without effort, without demand. There is nothing to fear in that quiet. It is what you are made of. It is what carried you here. Notice, one more time, the grain of sand in your palm. Notice how small it is. Notice how warm it is in your imagination. Notice that it has been with you this whole time. Let your palm curl gently around it. If your hand is at your side, let it rest there. If it is on the blanket, let it stay. If it is already on your chest, let it be exactly where it is. Now let the palm come to your chest, if it is not there already. Let it rest gently, softly, on the place where your heart is. Not to check on it, not to feel for it, just to rest there. The grain is in your palm. The palm is on your chest. The chest is rising and falling, slowly, quietly, without any effort. Feel the small, quiet rhythm of your own breath moving under your hand. In and out, in and out. Each breath a small, quiet echo of every process we have talked about tonight. Each breath a small, quiet piece of the same universe we have been walking through. You do not have to think anymore. You do not have to hold any of the numbers. You do not have to remember any of it. You do not have to be anything other than this. A small, warm shape held by a small, warm bed in a small, warm room on a small, warm world, 10 centimeters from a grain of sand in a modest backyard, in an average arm of a continent-shaped disk, in a small archipelago of galaxies, in an immense heaven of a supercluster, in a bubble of 2 trillion islands, in a possibly endless dark that made you out of its own oldest ingredients so that you could be here tonight. That is enough. That has always been enough. You are allowed to sleep now. Let the walls of the room around you soften. Let the room become a little quieter than it already is. Let the dark outside the window become friendlier than it was when the story started. Let the pillow beneath your head hold you a little more completely. Let the grain of sand in your palm stay warm. Let the palm on your chest stay easy. Let the chest rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. If tomorrow is a hard day, tomorrow is far away, it cannot reach you tonight. If yesterday still hurts a little, yesterday is behind you, it cannot come back into the room. There is only this one soft moment, this one soft breath, this one soft body, this one soft grain of sand in the palm of one soft hand on the chest of one very small, very precious, very improbable listener. You are here. You are inside everything. You are made of everything. You are the universe, wondering what a night feels like, in a shape that can feel a night. Wherever you are listening from, whatever hour has softly found you, thank you for walking this far with me. Thank you for holding the grain the whole way. Thank you for being brave enough to look at the size of the room and gentle enough to come back home to yourself when the story was done. Rest now. Let the story keep going without you for a little while. The universe will still be there in the morning. 2 trillion islands will still be drifting quietly in their ocean. The horizon will still be exactly where we left it. The possibly endless dark will still be doing whatever it does past the edge of what we can see. None of it needs you to watch it tonight. All of it is fine. All of it will keep going, quietly, patiently, without asking anything of you. Your only job right now is to rest. Your only job right now is to breathe. Your only job right now is to let your small warm body sink softly into the small warm bed on the small warm world that is holding you. Sleep well tonight, small one. The universe is unimaginably bigger than a grain of sand, and somehow so are you.